All right, chapter 5, section 7. This is the last lesson for your test. Your test is Tuesday. Your test reviews have already been posted on Canvas. So I'm going to post one more, but there are two up there as of right now. So let's go ahead and finish this. So for this lesson, we are not proving that triangles are congruent. We're using congruent triangles to prove missing pieces. Okay, proving that angles or sides are congruent. So when you're looking at this, how to prove two segments or angles are congruent, meaning is this segment congruent to this segment? Prove that this angle is congruent to this angle. You have to understand what is congruent at first. So what do I mean by that? Your first step in order to prove a segment or an angle is to prove that your triangles are congruent. This is a little typo. Don't try and read this. You want to prove that two triangles are congruent. That's the first thing you want to prove. If your two triangles are congruent using side, angle, angle, HL, side, angle, side, or side, angle. And you want to prove that a side on something else is congruent, meaning that side is not a part of your congruency statement, then you can use CPCTC. I know that sounds like a lot, but once you understand what that means, it'll make more sense. CPCTC is corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, that's what it means. So if you are stating that two parts are congruent, you are using CPCTC. And I'm going to give you an example. I know it's going to sound confusing, but as we're going in the proofs in the next 3 slides, you're going to be able to maybe make a connection and it'll be a little more easier. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give you kind of like an example of what this means. So first, I'm going to go ahead and draw 2 triangles. And I'm going to label these triangles. I have A, B, C, D, E, F.
Does it matter where you start when you read?
No. As long as you're writing your corresponding sides. So the first, when you're writing your congruency statement, triangle, whatever is congruent to triangle, whatever, it doesn't matter how you write the first one, as long as the second one is corresponding with the first one. Okay. So if I'm looking at this, I can go ahead and write my congruency. It doesn't have to be ABC. I'll go ahead and write it as CAB. How would I write the second one? Good. FDE. Okay. So I know they're congruent how? By what? How do I know that these two triangles are congruent? Say it one more time. Good. Angle, side, angle. So when we are using CPCT, is if they're asking, let's just say they were to ask me, go ahead and find, are angles B congruent to angle E? There are 2 ways that I can prove that these are congruent. Yes, going through my proof and proving that my triangles are congruent, which I did, using angle, side, angle. But now if I want me to prove that angle B is congruent to angle E, there are 2 things I could use. The first thing is going to be third angles theorem. Can anybody tell me what third angles theorem is? Does anybody remember what that is? What's third angles theorem? Yeah.
If 2 angles are congruent, what are these 2?
Good. So if you have 2 angles that are congruent on 2 triangles, then the third angle will also be congruent. So I could use third angles theorem, or I could use CPCTC. What that means is, because my 2 triangles are going to be congruent, all the corresponding sides in my triangle will also be congruent. So that is one way to look at it. Or if they were to ask me, is side AB congruent to DE? Or if they ask, is segment CB congruent to FE? I would say yes. Why? Because CPCTC. Again, if my triangles are congruent, the corresponding parts of the congruent triangles will also be congruent. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? Okay. If my triangles are congruent, that means all corresponding parts are going to be congruent. So that means both my sides will be congruent and my angles will be congruent. So as we're going on the proofs, you'll kind of see how that is used and why we still have to prove that triangles are congruent before I state what I have to prove. So looking at example number 1, go ahead and go to example number 1. We're going to go ahead and do a proof here. So looking at this, go ahead and make your 2-column proof. We're still using those. I have my statements and my reasons. And we should be able to know the first one. The first one should be the easiest. Yes, the first one is given. Thank you. So the first one, I'm going to go ahead and write what's given. PR bisects angle QPS and PQ. Segment PQ is congruent to segment PS. And yes, that is given. Are my congruency marks marked on my diagram? No, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Always mark your congruency marks just so you're able to see what's missing or what you can prove. So I'm going to go ahead and mark PQ and PS. What am I going to do next? What can I do next? What can I also prove? Keep in mind the first one says the word bisect. A segment bisects an angle. What would most likely go next?
Definition of
Good. So 2, I'm going to have definition of, we're dealing with angles. So I'm going to put angle bisector. So if you're not sure on how to write your angles, I highly recommend highlight. Here is PQ, or not PQ, PR is bisecting QPS. So look at where the vertex is. What 2 angles are being bisected? Can anybody tell me what 2 angles are being bisected? Yeah? Okay, those are segments. I need an angle. Jonah?
QPR and SPR.
Good. So I'm going to write it. You were close. You only had to do the last one. QPR is going to be congruent to angle SPR. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and draw that. This angle is congruent to this angle. Is there anything else that I can see is congruent here? Yeah.
PR is congruent to itself.
Good. PR is congruent to itself. PR is congruent to PR, or PR is congruent to RP, however you want to write it. I'll do PR is congruent to PR. How do I know?
Reflexive property.
Good. Reflexive property. Did I prove that both my triangles are congruent? Yeah. So remember, in order for me to tell that certain angles are congruent, I need to first prove that my triangles are congruent. So I'm going to go ahead and state triangle QPR is congruent to triangle SPR by what? What is it? Side, angle, side. So side, angle, side. So because my triangles are congruent, is Q and S also congruent? Yes. Angle Q is congruent to angle S. How do I know they're congruent? Because this is a congruent triangle. All corresponding parts of congruent triangles are going to be congruent. So that means these sides are going to be congruent, these angles are going to be congruent, and these angles right here are also going to be congruent. Okay, so I just proved that Q and S is congruent because both of my triangles were congruent using side, angle, side. Any questions on this first one? All right, looking at example number 2. Looking at example number 2, it's similar. I'm using the same diagram, but we're going to go ahead and write your 2-column proof. You have your statements and your reasons. And the first one should be easy. I'm going to have what's given. So PR bisects Q, angle QPS, and angle QRS, and this is given. They want me to prove that RQ is congruent to RS. Okay, they want me to prove those segments. So after something is being bisected, what should I have next? Good, I'm gonna have definition of, I'm dealing with angles, so I'm just gonna put my angle sign, bisector. Keep in mind it's bisecting 2 angles. So I'm gonna have 2 pairs of congruent angles. So again, I'm gonna use my highlighter. This right here, PR, is bisecting 2 things. My first one, I'm going to go ahead and do QPS, and then my second one is QRS. So what 2 things are going to be bisected? Yes.
Angle QRS and angle S, sorry.
Good, so that's my blue one. I'm going to go ahead and write it. Angle QRS is going to be congruent to angle S, not QRS, QRP. Okay, it's QRP because it's this angle right here. And then SRP making this angle right here congruent. And then what about my purple one? Who could give me out?
QPR and then SPR.
Good. Angle QPR is also going to be congruent to angle SPR. Okay, so kind of follow what it's given. So I'm going to go ahead and make those little marks. Let me just erase what's on the inside so we don't get too confused. So again, let me draw what I had. This right here. And this was being bisected right here in the middle. So that makes this angle congruent to this angle. And this angle, I'm using 2 because this should be a different measure, is congruent to this angle. Is there anything else that I can tell is congruent? I can't tell that Q and S is congruent because they're not giving me my measures, Katya. Good. I'm going to have PR is congruent to RP, or PR. You could write it over again. How do I know? Good. They're reflexive. Can I prove that both my triangles are congruent?
Yes.
Yes, using what?
Angle, side angle.
Good. Angle, side angle. And again, it doesn't matter the order of the first one. So I'm going to do angle PRQ is congruent to, make sure you have the corresponding sides. Corresponding to P is P. Corresponding to R is R. And corresponding to Q is S. So I proved that both my triangles are congruent, and because I have 2 congruent triangles, that means, good, RQ is going to be congruent to RS because all corresponding sides or corresponding parts of congruent triangles are going to be congruent. All the corresponding parts. That means all my sides and all my angles are going to be congruent. All right, questions, comments, concerns on this? Katya?
You said that the CPCTC was because the triangles are congruent.
Uh-huh.
Does it state that? Can you say
What do you mean?
Well, because the thing before was that angle PR is U instead of PRS. But shouldn't you, in order to use CPCTC, stay in the triangle and first?
Those are the triangle signs. She just.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, I messed up. These should be the triangle symbols, not the angles. So, yeah, make these triangles, because your triangles are going to be congruent by angle, side angle. Thank you. Yeah, so you need to state that your triangles are congruent, and then whatever they're asking you for is going to be congruent. Thanks. Yeah, so I know. All right, any questions on this? All right, go ahead and try the last one on your own. Go ahead and do the last one. I'll give you a few minutes, and then we'll check it. So just again, this is good practice because on your test, there will be 2 completely blank proofs. So this is a good format of practice. You guys will have to fill it out on the test, but there will be, again, no more than 4 steps. Okay, 4 statements, 4 reasons. Some could have less. So just be aware you guys will be writing your own proofs. There will be 2 of them on your test. So please practice this and try and do it yourself. All right, let's go ahead and go over this one. Example number 3. Given WX is congruent to YZ and ZW is congruent to XY. Let me go ahead and make my column proof. Prove that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. So I have my statements, I have my reasons. WX is congruent to YZ and ZW is congruent to XY. So first thing is my marks are not made on my diagram. Please make sure you are marking your diagram. It's going to help. So I'm going to go ahead and put my little congruency marks. I have WX is congruent to ZY or YZ. ZW is congruent to XY. Okay, this is given. Is there anything else that I can state as congruent? No, Jonah?
ZX.
Good. 2ZX is congruent to ZX. It is reflexive. Are these 2 triangles going to be congruent?
Yeah.
Yes. By what? Triangle XWZ is congruent to triangle ZYX by what? Yes. Go ahead. Yep. Side, side, side. I'm not proving if they're congruent. I'm proving if angle 1 and 2 are congruent. So looking at it, first thing, do not state that they are alternate interior angles. They are not showing me that I have parallel lines. There's nothing here in this diagram that says my lines are parallel. There's no arrows. There's no right angles. I don't know if they're congruent using alternate interior angles. So I cannot state that. So if my triangles are congruent, and they are because we proved that they are, I can state that angle 1 and 2 will also be congruent because all my corresponding parts of my congruent triangles are going to be congruent. So your last one should have been CPCTC. Any questions on this one? All right, your homework. For 5-7, there are paragraph proofs. I need you guys to write them in 2-column proofs. There's just 10 questions. Okay, so all 10 questions are paragraph proofs. Just write them as 2-column proofs, please. And that is your homework for 5-7. Again, your test review is already posted. So if you finish the homework and you want to get started on the test review, it's on Canvas and it's been posted since yesterday. So please work on that for your test on Tuesday.